Hey guys, it's me again coming on. I know it's been a minute. Um, I had some trip ups the last week. My son wasn't doing too well, and as a result, things got out of whack. Saturday was a no go. We went out that day, and then it just didn't turn out good. So I'm going to try my best to keep moving forward with Saturday and trying to do the spiritual Saturday. It is going to happen. The topic I wanted to do didn't get to happen, so I'm just going to carry it forward. But that's not why I'm on today. If you don't know who I am, hi, I'm Ashley. I'm a higher self channeler. What I specialize in is connecting people to their higher self. So it's kind of like you giving yourself therapy. I'm simply just a vessel that gets people interconnected with their higher self information. So, really and truly, if you kind of want to be therapized by yourself, and have that unique interaction with your own information versus ambiguous and left-handed things that have nothing to do with you, I would try me out because I definitely can shake things up in your life. But aside from that, that's not why I'm here. What I wanted to come on with is like sometimes in life, and I'll say this as someone who's been on the journey for some time, and maybe you guys have been too, but I want to distinguish this because I feel like this needs to be expressed. So I said that I had some hangups, right? Now, realistically, the only time you call them hangups is when you have a goal in mind and perhaps things get desisted, slowed down, or just outright not possible. So, why these three things are needed to be distinguished is because sometimes when you are following some type of plan or God's plan for that matter, you notice that there are certain parameters put on your life. And I would love to say that we're always manifesting the most gleeful existence. However, I will say that that truly would never allow for the experience of what it is to be human. Because if you didn't have things to learn all through your journey, you'd probably find it really dull and not want to sustain yourself here if you weren't learning anything. So, why we may be put in these slowdowns, let's say, because that's what I think I've been going through. It's like I have this big goal in mind, and yet every time I try to pursue it, being that I told you guys I wanted to promote and do all this, and things seem to be slowing me down. Now I have to understand that is it my persistence or is it that truly the world around me is trying to give me a message, slow down. Another thing I will say is like, let's say, for example, you turn every corner or you go through every path and you find blockades or you find that dead end at the end of the road. Truly, that is what the experience is trying to teach you, is that maybe what you're after is a dead end and you should turn around and start fresh. And then there's times where the universe just spits you out completely and you don't really have a choice in the matter. And it's simply because you're on the wrong path. That also occurs. And most of us in our lives are always screaming out, why me, God? Why does this happen? And it's not to say that we all don't participate in that from time to time, but for those of us on the journey as chosen and or star seeds or ascenders for that matter, we know that this particular journey is a little more studded with a little more conflict than most, simply because we have to show the way. How does one show the way if they've never lived through anything? How does one show the way if they haven't gone over certain mountains that others are now climbing, right? So realistically, what I will say is that in any point in time, God allows for these points of pain and suffering to teach us something. And if you're someone who does not believe that, it may be because you yourself are in a state of perhaps wallowing or in what people like to call victimized mentality. And we've all been there, we are human. But if you are someone who's gone through this and you've seen that there's a rhyme and a reason for some of the pain you face, you do truly realize things that you are growing, you're changing, you're evolving, and you're becoming more ingenious every time you hit these, let's say, like darker days or these painful stretches in life, because really it's trying to show you something that you need to learn. And most people would be like, why is pain and suffering something that God allows for? Well, as someone who has gone through many pains and struggles in my lifetime, I may not look it, but I am it, so I'm going to talk about it. But I will say what I have learned through suffering. I have learned a lot of endurance, and I bet you guys have too. It's not a quality that you may think about that you've really learned, but I'm talking about times. And when I say dark times, I don't mean like, oh, the lights went out. I mean like you don't want to wake up the next day type of dark times. You know what I mean? Because sometimes on this journey, it brings you there. And that is the truth. I mean, you end up finding that you have endurance. How do you find you have endurance? Because that day that you decided, hey, you know what, I really, wouldn't be too sad if I didn't wake up tomorrow. When you do wake up that next day, you still have to get through it, right? And it's probably the hardest day of your life. But that's where the endurance comes from. You taught yourself that day that you have the will to get through it and you're strong enough to do it. And that's a huge, huge congratulatory clap for all of us. Because really and truly, some of us would give up. Some of us would change our ways in a way that may not be suiting to pain and suffering. All of us can do things that can try to escape pain and suffering. But if we actually process it and go through the actual endurance of it all, you come out of it a little more grateful because you realize certain skills that you've possessed in, or you've actually spiritually MacGyvered the situation because you've become a little more ingenious trying to get your way out of this sad mix sometimes of yourself and what you're facing in life. And realistically, it does give you a lot of resolve, and not just resolve, it gives you a lot of resilience. And this overall strength gives you a thicker skin to handle things, more evasive things, more convoluted things in the future. And sometimes we must pass through these times in order to teach us these skills. So pain and suffering not only serves a purpose at times, but it also is one of the greatest teachers. Unfortunately, we're one of the species on this planet that doesn't seem to learn too well from rainbows and unicorns and all that of the such. We tend to fix and change our behavior solely from learning from pain and suffering, which isn't really great. But if you do change your behavior, or you learn from the pain and suffering how to change your attitude, or actually to not repeat the same action again, that's a huge congratulatory moment once again. Because the thing is, a lot of us will, hit our proverbial head, I don't even know how many times, before we realize, hey, this isn't really what I need. This isn't really what's working. I can only stay in victim mentality until it hurts myself too much to even continue. Because sometimes what people don't realize is victim mentality actually is injuring you the entire time. It's slowing down your process of releasing and letting go. It's slowing down your process at actually healing and going through the motions of maybe mourning. When it comes to things such as like wars or death or poverty, there are a lot deeper ingrained pains and sufferings that others may be facing in the long term, you know what I mean? And in order to really get through it, you have to have that determination or that confidence or commitment to that change of self that needs to occur. The pain and suffering is a teacher because it will help you morph. It will help you show that there are other ways and directions, and or like I said, this MacGyvering that takes place, because you start to see things in different ways that you may not have had before. Like, I mean, realistically, if let's say you've been in poverty, and I mean, I can raise my hand to that. If you're, broke for a week, that's one thing. But if you're broke consistently for months and or like half a year to a year, you become very ingenuity in how you make your movements, because everything is somewhat being tried in a new state, because everything else that you were trying to do left you for broke, right? So these are the things that sometimes we don't really truly understand why we're going through them. We say to ourselves, why is it that we have to be in this position? Why is it that others are not in this position? Well, all I will say to you, just like our parents always said to us, if everyone jumped off a bridge, are you going to do it? You can't put yourself in the same categories as everyone else, because you have your own plan, your own life plan, and your own life to live in God's eyes, in your own God self, as you walk your own path. Only you can cultivate and work through what you're seeing or what you're enduring or what you're going through. So I will say this, when it does come to bigger things like war, for example, this is a behavior that we still haven't learned from. And unfortunately, I think that we will have the reoccurrence happen over and over again until we learn the simple truth of love and understanding. and that is the real MacGyver of spirit that needs to take place, or the ingenious, simple solution. Yet it's something that eludes us because we're filled with sometimes more. Like I said, we try to get away from the pain and the suffering sometimes with the most indirect and oppositional forces, which is hate. It's kind of odd, but when humans are kind of put up into the wall when it comes to something as grand as war, with so much devastation, so much pain, and so much suffering to be had, it's funny, and not funny, it is ironic that humans will sometimes retaliate with the same causings that are causing the pain and suffering in the first place. So, all I will say with that is that if you do believe that we are part of this conscious field, even if you can learn how to maneuver through your pain, or at least accept that pain and suffering is something that is trying to teach us, even on all levels. I would think that acceptance in your heart does start to transform the way you look at things. And like I said, if you are in the victim mentality, or if you are blaming at that in this point of your pain and suffering, which is again common and normal and what humans do, what I will say is that if you do believe the words coming out of my mouth, know that that is something you can change instantly by just saying, you know what, I decide to move on at this moment. And the thing is that it is injuring you because it is prolonging. Now, if you do understand and you go through your pain and you start to, school yourself on how you can change behaviors quickly or change attitudes more rapidly, you'll notice that the time gets cut shorter and shorter and shorter each time you are thrown a new version of pain and suffering, or a dark night, or a storm, as people put it. And the thing is never to lose sight of what you are learning, simply because you are in need of being there at that moment right now. And I know that sounds facetious, and I know a lot of people think I'm making this up, but you are always where you're supposed to be. So if you are kind of delayed right now, or if you are in some form of pain and suffering, just know we've all been there, and we've all been to low, low places too. So sometimes you're just being stopped. Sometimes you're being shown a lesson, and sometimes you should be turning all the way around. Sometimes these three small things do come into play when you are faced with these dark days that we go through in the soul. And what I will say, the last thing that most people have a very hard time with, and if you are facing this, I am very sorry to bring this up, but it is a part of life, unfortunately, which is death. Sometimes we don't realize that in death, there are things to be learned as well. I'll give a weird example, okay? Like I would say over a decade ago, my mom and her sister were really close, and as time grew on, they kind of fell apart, as sometimes sisters do. But the weird thing was that they had more in common than they did not. And at the end of my aunt's life, I will say they both had two things in common, which was vices, where they would both be big drinkers and big smokers. And in the end of my aunt's death, what my mom realized is that she was right there with her, in the sense of what she was up to in life, and how old she was only a year older. So she realized with her sister's passing, not only was it hard, not only was she grieving, she was processing the pain and suffering that she was going through, and she related into two forms, which is where everyone gets to, which is these two places that you can go. So you can always change that behavior and attitude so that you change the action for yourself, or you continue on to ignore it and continue the pain and suffering onward. So my mom decided from that moment on, after she processed the pain and suffering, that she wasn't going to follow suit. So she ended up eventually quitting smoking. She smoked a pack a day. And then eventually, over time, as she worked on it, she stopped drinking. So, in some ways, a death doesn't always have to end in just pain and suffering, but to also be seen as something that can be processed and learned from too. I know that sounds so severe and harsh, and I hope a lot of people don't get mad at me, but this particular situation, and trust me, I've had many more deaths in my family. I'm just using this as an example for one. But because of that, my mom is still alive today. And also, by me seeing my own mother change, it also did encourage me down the road to take a look at my own habits and my own vices and my own dependencies and crutches and say to myself, well, if she made this shift, I can do it too. So we don't realize sometimes that we end up becoming the lesson for others, even by going through pain and suffering. And it's not to say that we want this, but I really don't feel like we came to this planet for a lovely pillow fight session. It's one of the places where our soul transforms. And as those that are evolving and ascending, unfortunately, we may have a little harder of a row to hoe, because simply we are trying to show others that it can be done. So please, if you are feeling like you are in one of these places right now, don't feel like you are alone, because a lot of us go through this in different degrees, depths, and magnitudes. So it is always good to know that you have brothers and sisters out there that are here for you, and hope that you find and realize what it is that is to be taken and learned from what you're currently going through. Now, with that said, I hope that you guys all have a brilliant night. I know this was a little different, but it's like I feel like for those of us right now, I truly feel like we're stretching. Like I feel like, at least for myself, like my soul is being stretched in ways that it's like, I don't know if this will make sense to people, but in a weird way, I feel like I had, and maybe you guys felt this too in the last months. I would say like maybe around springtime. I was feeling really secure in my path, etc. And it's not to say that I am not at this moment in time, but it's like as if in these last months, I've been feeling like I've been getting stretched so that I can transform into something else. And I've been stretched and stretched. And I don't know if you guys have been feeling this too. It's like, you know that you are who you are, and you're going to strive to be the ultimate you that you are. But now this you that you are is being stretched. And why I say it's for a transformation is because I keep getting reminded of this time I was in Italy. And this was years ago. Like I'd have to say like, well, 2012, I was in Italy. And I remember I was in the south of Italy, and I was in love with mozzarella di bufala. Okay, mozzarella di bufala. It's buffalo mozzarella. It's awesome stuff. But I used to get like a whole ball for like €1. That's how good it was back then. I'm pretty sure that's not the price right now. But what I remember was I was in this huge cheese shop, and the men were just like stretching and stretching and stretching the mozzarella. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, it's a lot of work. Like, what's the point of this? Like, what's the difference between, the curd and just like balling it, or like this whole process of stretching? So the Italian guy told me that the reason why they stretch it was so that they can morph the cheese itself into a different form. And I was like, huh? I'm like, well, you started with the curds. What's the difference from the stretching? And he's like, nah. He's like, what you don't understand is that the fibers in the cheese change by stretching. Yes, you are starting with the same cheese, which is the curd. But the thing is, from the stretching, you create it into a totally different breed, a totally different type of cheese altogether. And in itself, without the stretching, you wouldn't have that oozing, lovely, stretchy cheese that you have, which is called mozzarella. So in a weird way, that kind of like came to my mind in these last, well, I wouldn't say I've been going through it for months, but I kept thinking like, now that I really feel like I'm really at my stretching point, let's say, I was like, oh my gosh, why do I keep thinking about this guy and the mozzarella? Or at least I'm getting shown that maybe we're being stretched like mozzarella so that our fibers can morph into a new formation from the already current self. It's a weird feeling and a weird thing to express, but I will honestly say that I know that God's timing is perfect. And I know that in a sense, we are imperfect, perfect beings trying to strive for perfection, I guess, in all states of being. Whatever that could be. I mean, your perfect could be totally different than my perfect. But the point is, I think as beings, we're always trying to strive for our best self, for our God self, for our God's plan within our lives. And I feel like, at least for myself, I'm being not only stretched, but I'm being put on pause at points where I'm just like hungry. You know what I mean? Sometimes I feel like I'm that greyhound in the stalls, just wanting to run after the rabbit so rapidly. You know what I mean? And just like go on for the race. But sometimes it's like maybe I just need to stay in this stretch point right now to see how amazing my current self can transform into. So sometimes you just have to trust in the process and know that if you are going through points of pain and suffering, or you are going through these elements of growth and change and revolution and ingenuity, and I mean, ingenuity is something, like I said, that MacGyver comes out of you when you're put in the corner and you have to figure out what your next move is. So I don't think there's anything else that can really teach us that. And I know it's sad to say, but the more I feel like we figure these things out for ourselves, and the more we transmute, and the more we can relate and adapt and grow and change, it's like that transmutation will formulate across the board to everyone else. And maybe if we all do it one by one within ourselves, even as chosen, even as light bearers, even as ascenders, that does have a true effect on the actual idea of the larger issues that we face in this world. Because I mean, we look out at this world and it all seems like it's being stretched. We're being stretched in our pockets with prices, with gas. We're being stretched with our quality of food, our air, our water. We're being stretched to the levels of insanity from what we see sometimes on television with politics in the way of the world right now. So it's like we're really at a stretching or a stretched point where it's like, I wouldn't say that mozzarella truly breaks. It's like it just stretches until it, snaps, I guess. But we're not snapping. I feel like we're being stretched in this moment in time to see how, how far we can really go. Because without this understanding that this is a time for us to truly take hold of what we're supposed to do. And taking hold can sometimes be put on hold. And if it's put on hold, it means that things have to come into play first. So don't ever lose sight of what's real for you. Don't ever lose sight or lose faith or lose hope. Even if you are in a dark point, hey, don't worry. There will be a brighter day. I truly feel like this too shall pass for whoever I'm speaking to right now. And I do love you. And if you like what I'm saying, please like, please share, please subscribe. I am going to try to get us up for Saturday. Now, if I do manage to get it all up and running and good to go, you'll probably see a promo on Thursday or Friday. But if you don't, I'm working on it. But either way, I will get it done. Good or done. If worse comes to worse, I'll still be doing a live. So I love you guys lots. Good night.